You see, there comes a moment in life when the person who has been holding everything together finally decides to let go. The one who always overextends, always explains, always waits for breadcrumbs, finally says no more. For the anxious, this moment doesn't come easily. It comes after countless nights of questioning themselves, of wondering if they were too much, too needy, too sensitive. But when they walk away, something profound happens, the dynamic shifts. For the avoidant, it is easy to believe that the anxious one will always be there, always reaching, always knocking on a door that never fully opens. But when that door is no longer being knocked on, when the footsteps fade, silence sets in. And silence, for the avoidant, is not peace. It is the beginning of their nightmare. Because in that silence, they can no longer hide behind distance. They can no longer rely on someone else to carry the weight of connection. They are left with themselves and the reality of what they pushed away. But here's the truth when the anxious walks away. It isn't just an act of leaving another person, it's an act of returning to themselves. It is a declaration that says, I will no longer beg for love that should flow freely. I will no longer chase someone who runs from what I'm worthy of receiving. That is not loss, that is freedom. And for the avoidant, what once felt like power, the ability to hold love at arm's length, suddenly becomes a prison. Because the nightmare isn't the anxious leaving. The nightmare is the realization that they had what they needed all along and they were too afraid to embrace it. This is not about villains and victims. This is about growth. The anxious learns that love cannot be sustained by grasping. It must be given space to breathe. And the avoidant learns that love cannot be kept safe by pushing it away. It must be faced with courage. So if you are the anxious one who has walked away, know this: you are not too much. You were just giving your love to someone who wasn't ready to hold it. Your walking away is not abandonment. It is alignment with your worth. And if you are the avoidant, know this: your nightmare is not punishment. It is your invitation. An invitation to face the fear you've been running from, to heal the wound that taught you love was dangerous, and to finally step into the intimacy you secretly crave. Because in the end, when the anxious walks away, the story doesn't end there. It is the beginning of one person's freedom and another person's awakening. And whichever side you stand on, your task is the same: to rise, to heal, and to choose love, not the fragile, fear-driven love that collapses under pressure, but the steady, courageous love that can stand the test of truth. The anxious partner's presence gives the avoidant safety without responsibility. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in relationships, yet it explains so much of the push and pull that keeps two people locked in a cycle of pain. The anxious one often doesn't realize the power they hold simply by staying, by showing up again and again despite the distance, despite the coldness, despite the mixed signals. They think they're the powerless one, the one always waiting, always hoping, always grasping for scraps of affection. But in truth, their presence is the very thing that allows the avoidant to maintain their comfort zone. The anxious one fills the silence with effort, with questions, with texts, with invitations. They provide reassurance that the connection still exists, even when the avoidant withdraws. For the avoidant, this creates a paradoxical kind of safety. They can retreat into their own world without fully losing the relationship because they know the anxious one will always bridge the gap. They don't have to risk vulnerability or step into intimacy fully because someone else is doing the heavy lifting. They don't have to face the loneliness that comes with disengagement because the anxious partner's pursuit covers it up. In this way, the anxious one becomes both the glue and the shield. They glue the relationship together by refusing to let go, and they shield the avoidant from having to confront their deepest fear, that intimacy will require something of them they don't know how to give. And so the anxious thinks, if I just try harder, if I just love more fiercely, maybe they'll come closer. But the harder they try, the more the avoidant leans back, trusting that the relationship won't collapse because someone else is always holding the net. The anxious becomes the stabilizer, the constant, the one who prevents the breakup, not realizing that by doing so, they also prevent growth. The avoidant never feels the real consequence of their distance because the anxious keeps absorbing the cost. This is why the anxious partner's presence is so powerful. It creates the illusion for the avoidant that the relationship is sustainable as it is. They believe they can keep withdrawing, keep avoiding, and nothing will change. Because up until now, nothing has. Every retreat is followed by pursuit. Every silence is broken by a call or a message. Every cold moment is met with warmth. Every absence with presence. The avoidant lives under the impression that they are free to protect themselves endlessly without ever losing the bond. But what's really happening underneath is that the anxious one is carrying the emotional weight of two people. They are running the marathon while the avoidant stands still and then wondering why they're exhausted. They are creating the sense of connection, nurturing it, keeping it alive. The avoidant benefits from the closeness without having to participate fully in it. They get the reassurance of love without the responsibility of showing up for it. It's as though the anxious one is watering a garden alone, believing that if they keep at it long enough, the other person will eventually pick up the watering can. The irony is that this arrangement doesn't serve either of them. The anxious one ends up depleted, resentful, and questioning their worth. The avoidant, though appearing comfortable, actually becomes more disconnected from their own capacity to love deeply. They don't have to stretch. They don't have to face their wounds. They don't have to learn intimacy. They remain stunted in the very place they are most afraid to grow, all because the anxious keeps making up the difference. The anxious partner's presence is therefore not a weakness. It is an incredible strength, but it's a strength that gets misdirected. Their persistence, their willingness to fight for love, is not the problem. The problem is that their strength allows someone else to stay weak. Their love cushions the avoidant from the reality that relationships require reciprocity. And so long as the anxious continues to carry that weight, the avoidant never has to learn to carry their own. Avoidance thrives on the pursuit. This is one of the hidden truths of why avoidant-anxious dynamics last as long as they do. On the surface, the avoidant appears like the one in control, the one who decides how much closeness there will be, how much time is spent together, how vulnerable the relationship can become. They appear to hold the power by pulling away, by creating distance, by keeping love at a safe arm's length. But what keeps this entire dynamic alive isn't the avoidance withdrawal, it's the anxious partner's pursuit. The chase is the oxygen. Without pursuit, avoidance cannot sustain itself. The avoidant has often built their inner world on the foundation of self-protection. Somewhere along the way, they learned that closeness brings risk. That vulnerability could mean rejection, suffocation, or loss. So their strategy is distance. They create space, they pull back, they become less available. But this strategy only works because the anxious partner steps forward into that space. It's the pursuit that validates the avoidance withdrawal. Every time the anxious one leans in after being pushed away, the avoidant learns, I can retreat and someone will come get me. I don't have to face the fear of abandonment because they'll never let me go that far. This is why pursuit becomes the avoidance comfort zone. It allows them to maintain their defenses while still enjoying the benefits of connection. They don't have to risk reaching out, don't have to sit in the discomfort of wondering whether they'll be loved if they show up. The anxious partner does that work for them. The chase keeps intimacy alive without requiring the avoidant to engage with it directly. The anxious becomes the bridge that closes every gap, the net that catches every fall, the voice that breaks every silence. But pursuit is also the very thing that enables avoidance to stay unchallenged. As long as the anxious one chases, the avoidant never has to face the consequences of their distance. They never have to feel the loneliness that would come if the anxious stopped showing up. They never have to recognize the cost of their withdrawal because someone else is covering it. In fact, avoidance depends on pursuit to justify itself. The avoidant thinks, if they are chasing me, it must mean I was right to step back. I was right to be cautious. Look how much they need. Me, my distance only makes me more valuable. Yet beneath the illusion lies a truth that neither side sees clearly. The anxious believes their pursuit is saving the relationship, when in reality it's keeping both people stuck in a cycle where no growth can happen. The avoidant believes their withdrawal is protecting them, when in reality it's only delaying the moment when they'll have to confront what they fear most, being truly seen and loved without conditions. Pursuit makes avoidance feel safe, but it also keeps them from experiencing the deeper intimacy they secretly long for. The moment the anxious stops pursuing, the entire system shifts. Suddenly, the avoidant can no longer depend on someone else to carry the weight of connection. The silence that once felt safe now feels heavy. The space that once gave them comfort now feels like a void. Without pursuit, avoidance is forced to confront its own emptiness. The nightmare begins when they realize that the love they thought would always be waiting isn't there anymore. This is why avoidance thrives on pursuit. It allows them to keep their defenses intact while still receiving love, attention, and affirmation. But what looks like thriving is actually stagnation. They are surviving, not growing. They are holding on to comfort while missing out on transformation. And as long as pursuit continues, avoidance will always win the short game, but lose the long one. Walking away is an act of reclaiming self-worth. For the anxious partner, this is not a simple decision, nor is it one that comes lightly. It comes after cycles of giving and waiting, cycles of trying to prove their love, cycles of hoping that if they just show enough devotion, they'll finally be met halfway. The anxious partner has often been conditioned to believe that their value lies in how much they can hold on to others, how much they can endure, how much they can sacrifice. So to walk away feels unnatural at first, almost like betraying their own nature. Yet beneath that discomfort lies the most powerful transformation they can make. The act of leaving is not about punishing the avoidant. It is not about manipulation or making a statement. It is about finally deciding that their energy, their love, and their presence are too valuable to be spent in a place where they are not received fully. The anxious person begins to understand that their worth was never supposed to be measured by how hard they could chase or how much of themselves they could shrink to fit into someone else's fears. Walking away becomes the ultimate declaration that says, I am no longer willing to diminish my value just to maintain your comfort. When the anxious chooses to walk, they are shifting the focus from external validation to internal strength. For so long, they've looked outside themselves for reassurance through texts, through affection, through any sign that they are wanted. But when those signs are inconsistent or withheld, it creates a cycle of dependency. Walking away breaks that cycle. It reorients the anxious partner back to their own center, back to the realization that love is not proven by how hard they fight to be chosen, but by how willing they are to choose themselves. And something extraordinary happens in that moment. The anxious, who once felt powerless, begins to experience a deep sense of empowerment. They realize that staying in a relationship where their needs are not met is not loyalty, it is self-abandonment. They realize that continuing to pour into someone who resists receiving is not devotion, it is depletion. In walking away, they reclaim the very things they thought they had lost: dignity, peace, and the right to be loved in the way they've always given love. This act of reclaiming is also deeply spiritual. It is not just about walking away from another person. It is about walking back toward oneself. It is the recognition that love, at its highest form, was never meant to be begged for. It was never meant to be transactional. It was meant to be reciprocal, life-giving, and safe. And if that is not what is being offered, then the most sacred act a person can do is to step away and trust that they are worthy of something greater. For the anxious, walking away can feel terrifying because it confronts their greatest fear, being alone. But with that fear also comes the discovery that solitude is not emptiness. It is space. It is space to breathe, to heal, to rediscover joy that isn't tied to someone else's approval. It is space to remember that their love is abundant, not because someone validates it, but because it flows naturally from who they are. And in that reclaimed space, they often discover the truth. That walking away does not mean they were too much. It means they were finally enough for themselves. It means they chose to no longer settle for scraps of affection when they were worthy of a feast. It means they stopped outsourcing their worth and began to embody it. Walking away becomes not just an ending, but the most courageous beginning, the start of living in alignment with the truth that their love is valuable, their heart is sacred, and their worth was never negotiable. The absence of pursuit awakens clarity. For as long as the anxious continues to chase, the avoidant lives inside a comforting illusion that love will always be there, no matter how far they withdraw. The anxious one bridges every gap, fills every silence, and restores connection after every rupture. This dynamic shields the avoidant from ever experiencing the real cost of their distance. But the moment the anxious finally steps back, something shifts dramatically. What was once covered up by pursuit is now exposed by silence, and that silence becomes the mirror the avoidant has been running from. In the absence of pursuit, the avoidant can no longer distract themselves with the comfort of being needed. For the first time, they are left alone with their own choices. They begin to notice the weight of the quiet, the heaviness of unreturned calls that no longer come, the void of attention they once took for granted. What felt like freedom when the anxious was chasing now feels like loss when the anxious is gone. This clarity often arrives suddenly, like a light breaking into a dark room, and it forces the avoidant to see that distance is not safety, it is isolation. For many avoidants, the pursuit of the anxious partner has been the safety net that allowed them to maintain their walls without ever falling into true loneliness. They were able to pull away while still receiving the reassurance of connection because someone else was always doing the work of holding on. But when that pursuit stops, they can no longer hide behind the illusion that intimacy can be postponed indefinitely. They feel, often for the first time, the full consequence of their withdrawal. They see that their pattern doesn't preserve love, it erodes it, and that recognition is sobering. This clarity is painful, but it is also necessary, because beneath every avoidant exterior lies the same human desire to love and be loved. The avoidance walls were never built to reject love, but to protect them from pain. Yet when the anxious walks away, the truth emerges that those walls are not protecting them. They are imprisoning them. Without pursuit, the avoidant has to confront the reality that they may lose what they secretly wanted all along: connection, intimacy, a partner who truly cares. And in that confrontation, something awakens. It is often in the absence of pursuit that the avoidant realizes the depth of love they were receiving all along. The little things they dismissed now return to mind: the consistency of the anxious, the warmth, the availability, the forgiveness. These were not signs of weakness, but of devotion, and once they are gone, the absence makes their value undeniable. Clarity comes not in the presence of pursuit, but in its withdrawal, because only then does the avoidant see what they risked and what they may have lost. But this awakening does not belong to the avoidant alone. For the anxious too, the absence of pursuit brings clarity. They see, sometimes for the first time, the true dynamics of the relationship. They realize that love should not have required endless effort to maintain. They begin to see that their worth cannot be measured by how much they chase or how well they endure rejection. By stepping back, they gain clarity about their own power, their resilience, and their right to a love that flows both ways. This clarity, though difficult, is transformative. It strips away the illusions that pursuit had kept alive for so long. It forces both people to face themselves honestly, the avoidant to see the loneliness behind their walls, the anxious to see the strength behind their letting go. And in that raw honesty lies the possibility of change, because clarity, even when it hurts, is the doorway to truth. Healing comes through courage, not control. Both the anxious and the avoidant carry wounds that shape how they approach love. The anxious often tries to heal by holding tighter, by managing every detail of the connection, by over-explaining, over-giving, and over-loving in an attempt to soothe their own fear of abandonment. The avoidant, on the other hand, attempts to heal by controlling distance, by withdrawing, by shutting down, by convincing themselves that if they remain in control of how close anyone can get, they will be safe from pain. Both strategies are rooted in control, and both keep love from flourishing. True healing only begins when each person steps into courage, the willingness to let go of the illusion of control and face the vulnerability they've been avoiding. For the anxious, courage looks like loosening their grip. It means daring to believe that they are worthy of love without having to fight endlessly for it. It means facing the fear of rejection without constantly trying to preempt it. It means choosing to love from a place of strength rather than desperation. This kind of courage is not about pretending they no longer care, but about learning to care for themselves enough to stop abandoning their own needs. It requires stepping into the unknown, where love might not be guaranteed, and yet standing tall anyway, trusting that their value does not diminish when someone fails to recognize it. For the avoidant, courage looks like stepping forward instead of pulling back. It means daring to believe that intimacy does not automatically lead to suffocation or loss. It means facing the discomfort of being seen fully and realizing that vulnerability does not equal weakness. It means allowing someone close, not because they feel forced, but because they choose to trust that love can exist without taking away their autonomy. This courage requires letting down walls, even brick by brick, and risking the very thing they fear most, dependence, so that they can finally taste the depth of love they secretly crave. Both anxious and avoidant strategies are ultimately attempts to control outcomes. The anxious thinks, if I do enough, they won't leave. The avoidant thinks, if I stay distant, I won't get hurt. But neither control nor distance actually prevents pain, they only prolong it. Healing begins when each person stops trying to guarantee the result and instead chooses to face the fear head on. That choice takes immense bravery because it means stepping into uncertainty with open hands instead of clenched fists. The truth is, love was never meant to be controlled. Love breathes when it is free, when it is chosen, when it is given and received openly. To move from control to courage is to shift from fear to faith that we are worthy of love, faith that we can survive loss, faith that vulnerability will not destroy us, but deepen us. Without that courage, both anxious and avoidant patterns keep people trapped in cycles that only reinforce the very wounds they are trying to protect. The anxious must learn that courage is not in the chase, but in the release. The avoidant must learn that courage is not in withdrawal, but in approach. And in both cases, healing emerges not from controlling the other person's behavior, but from transforming their own when they lean into bravery, when they risk being honest, risk being authentic, risk being open. They begin to discover a love that is far stronger than the fragile arrangements fear had constructed. Healing through courage is the kind of healing that liberates both partners. It frees the anxious from the chains of needing to prove themselves and frees the avoidant from the prison of isolation. It does not promise that every relationship will last, but it promises that those who walk in courage will never again lose themselves inside the dynamics of fear. And in that, they find a love that is whole, not because it is perfect, but because it is true. When the anxious walks away, it is not the end of love. It is the rebirth of it. It is the moment when illusions fall away and truth rises to the surface. For one, it becomes the freedom of finally choosing themselves. For the other, it becomes the awakening to what was taken for granted. And for both, it becomes an invitation to grow into the kind of love that is no longer driven by fear, but anchored in courage, respect, and worth. Every relationship we enter is a mirror. It shows us what we are ready to heal, what we are still afraid to face, and what kind of love we believe we deserve. The anxious is called to see their strength in letting go, and the avoidant is called to see their strength in showing up. Neither side is broken, both are simply invited into a higher way of loving. So, wherever you find yourself in this story, whether you've been the one chasing or the one running, remember this: healing does not come from holding tighter or pushing further away. Healing comes from stepping into courage, from choosing truth over fear, and from allowing yourself to be loved without condition and without walls. That is where the real story begins. Thank you for giving me the privilege to share this with you today. My hope is that you walk away not only with clarity, but with the courage to live it out, because the love you seek, the love you crave, the love you deserve, it begins with the love you choose to give yourself. Take this with you, live it, breathe it, and never forget you are worthy, you are enough, and the right love will always rise to meet you when you stop chasing what diminishes you. Thank you, and may you leave here stronger, braver, and freer than you came.